Right, let's talk about something else briefly and then start doing calls. 83% of schools have made their history lessons woke, and a huge number of secondary schools have changed teaching to focus more on diversity. You know, if we don't get some decent teachers in this country, as I said earlier on in the programme, we are going to find ourselves sadly lacking behind many other countries. Portia Berry-Kilby, or Kilby, I do beg your pardon, Portia, I think I got that wrong last time we spoke, is a political commentator, and she joins us now. Portia, good evening.
Evening, James. How are you?
I'm good. You sound in the miles away.
Oh, do I? I am in the back of beyond in rural England. So.
Are you really? Where?
well, not that far. I'm in North Essex.
Oh, North Essex. Oh, I know it well.
Border with Suffolk.
Yes, I know it well. Very nice. Well, I'm sitting in the Garden of England, where it's quite warm this evening.
Lovely. I don't believe it's warm, though.
Well, it'd be pretty warm, yeah. Tell me your thoughts on this. 80% of schools now changing their history lessons. I didn't even think they taught history anymore.
They definitely don't teach the history that they should. Yeah, it's very concerning that you have kind of this invasion of tokenism into the curriculum, and that by teaching about Black history, women's LGBTQI history, you're really communicating to these children.
Who gives us stuff about all of that? I mean, kids are not interested in that.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. And you basically end up with these teachers inflating the importance of a child's race, skin colour, sexuality, to a greater importance than it ever should be. And rather than them just being humans and people going to school in Britain, they become all of these compounding variables, like a lesbian, Asian, disabled student. And
why are they allowed to do this, Portia? Why are the educational departments allowed to inflict this, as many universities are?
I think there's not sufficient backlash, to be fair, and I think a lot of parents are quite happy to have their children given this education that panders to the political whims and the culture wars of the day. And it's kind of elevating 16-year-olds and younger even to adults who can dictate what they want to learn. And you have them kind of campaigning and lobbying their teachers, so to speak, to teach them about Black history, despite the fact that they don't really know any history at all. And they are pandered to and get their way.
Well, then it needs to be stopped, and I don't understand why people aren't talking out about it. You know, people say, oh, well, I'm going to cancel you. Well, you can flipping try and cancel me all you like. I could do worse back. I'm just getting sick of it, like so many people in this country, sick of being told what I should think, what I should say, how I should behave myself. I mean, just absolutely barking bloody mad, and it has to stop, or there will be a backlash.
I think so, and I think the longer it's left to fester, the worse the problem is going to be down the road, because it ends up making very moderate and sensible middle-of-the-road people slightly more retaliatory to being censored, not just in what they can say, but even what they can think. And I think the current government is trying to avoid the whole culture wars and that whole kettle of fish, but really they should come forward with a coherent philosophy behind it and not cave to what is a minority voice.
Do we blame this on Boris's wife?
It definitely would come more from Carrie than Boris, I would bet. I can absolutely guarantee it would. I wouldn't even think he knows what half of these things are. Oh, no, I think you're quite right. And it is there is a generational divide. And the sad thing comes when you have grandparents not saying things because their grandchildren are telling them that they're homophobic or they're a bigot. And really, they just come at things from a slightly different angle. And they are, at the end of the day, entitled to their opinion.
Well, they're entitled to their opinion, but in my view, it's been bastardized by some pretty ridiculous teachers. Luckily, I've got two very sort of switched-on grandchildren. One's in the Marines, so he's not politically pandered to or being... although they are trying to sort of woke up the army a bit, but that won't work. And the other one thinks a lot of this stuff is just the most stupid thing she's ever heard. But it seems to be the woke brigade are sort of 25 to 35.
Yes, I think the woke wardens are definitely of that generation. And the sad thing is that that generation hasn't had a very good history education themselves. So they're kind of ones to talk, who hate any mention of the British Empire despite knowing very little about it themselves. But there is the worry that younger people, so people under 18, are also kind of being infected with the same mentality and aren't learning critical thinking skills, and it's always easy to jump on the woke bandwagon because it's not intellectually interrogated.
Yeah, and I also think, the British Empire may have had its bad bits, but then so did mainly any other country that was a conquering nation in the past. But those conquering nations helped to bring other countries up to a modern standard of living. Not all, because unfortunately, when this will really wind a few up, but unfortunately, when Britain left a few of the countries that it was ruling, they just fell into dictatorship and became completely appalling places to live, didn't they?
Which is something that many people on the woke left won't like to admit. And so there was a petition that went around for my former secondary school asking that the teachers talk or teach about the horrors of the British Empire. And it was always prefaced with this adjective, rather than, or like the horrific British Empire, rather than the good points and the bad points, or just the history, and letting people make their own conclusions.
It always had to be... have you got the name of the idiot that sent that? We should give them some publicity.
Sorry, say that again.
I said, who sent that round in your school? You should start giving the person a bit of publicity and a bit of embarrassment. Anybody who sends something round like that deserves to be kicked out of teaching if, in fact, they were a teacher.
And ridiculed, yes.
Yeah, ridiculed.
Just very blind to the reality.
You see, I upset people now by saying, and I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I'm a huge royalist, but do we really need the Commonwealth? I mean, most of, look at Nigeria and the way they behave. Do we really need to have them in our little band of friends?
Well, I think Nigeria, there are many issues there which should be solved. And I think the Commonwealth, when it's working as it should, works very well. But there has to actually be a belief in the Commonwealth for it to achieve what it should.
I mean, there are loads more to discuss here, Portia. We'll do it at another time. But what we really do need is a complete reshake of the way history is taught in this country and the way education is managed as well.
Very much so. And I think maybe the solution is attracting a different caliber of teachers. You need to incentivize good teachers and not intellectually lazy ones.
Couldn't agree more. Portia, thank you very much indeed. Portia Berry-Kilby, who is a political commentator.